Sometimes the hardest promise to keep is the one you make to someone who is no longer here to hear it. Nathan Brooks tightened his grip on the worn wooden box, resting carefully in his arms as he stood before an aging white farmhouse at the end of a quiet country road outside Asheville, North Carolina. Golden afternoon sunlight filtered through towering oak trees, scattering gentle shadows across a front porch that looked as though it had been waiting years for someone to return. Inside the box rested a lifetime of carefully protected memories. A weathered baseball glove, a faded Marine Corps photograph, several handwritten journals, a pocket watch with scratched initials engraved on the back. Every item had once belonged to Nathan's closest friend, Daniel Carter, who had trusted him with one final request many years earlier. Nathan had repeated that promise to himself countless times, yet walking toward the front door somehow felt more difficult than he had imagined. His 9-year-old daughter, Lily, stood quietly beside him, holding a small bouquet of fresh white daisies they had picked together that morning. She looked up at her father with gentle concern. "Are you nervous?" Nathan smiled softly. "A little." Lily reached for his free hand. "Mom used to say that doing the right thing sometimes feels scary first." Nathan squeezed her hand gently. She was right. Taking one slow breath, he knocked on the old wooden door. The sound echoed softly through the quiet house. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Nathan wondered if perhaps no one lived there anymore. Then footsteps approached from inside, steady but unhurried, followed by the quiet click of the lock. The front door slowly opened, revealing a woman with shoulder-length blonde hair and kind blue eyes who looked to be in her middle 30s. She paused the moment she saw the stranger standing on her porch carrying an old wooden memory box. Nathan found himself equally surprised. He had expected Daniel's elderly parents to answer the door, not someone he had never met before. The woman studied his face with quiet curiosity before speaking first. "Can I help you?" Nathan cleared his throat politely. "I hope so. I am looking for the Carter family. I promised an old friend that one day I would bring these things home." Her expression changed almost instantly. She looked down at the carefully protected box before slowly raising her eyes again. "You knew my brother?" Nathan blinked in surprise. "Your brother?" She nodded gently. "I am Emily Carter." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The afternoon breeze stirred the oak leaves above them, while Lily quietly stepped closer to her father's side, sensing that something important had just happened. Nathan looked once more at the familiar last name beside the front door, then back at Emily's calm but emotional face. He had traveled hundreds of miles believing he was simply returning a friend's belongings. He never imagined that opening one ordinary front door would become the first step toward changing 3 lives forever. 5 years earlier, long before Nathan Brooks found himself standing on the Carter family's front porch, life had followed a very different rhythm. Every weekday morning began before sunrise inside a modest 2-bedroom home on the outskirts of Asheville. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the kitchen while 8-year-old Lily hurried to finish her cereal before school. A framed family photograph rested beside the window, showing Nathan, his late wife Sarah, and a smiling toddler whose laughter still echoed through every corner of the house. Although Sarah had passed away after a sudden illness 3 years earlier, Nathan never removed her picture because he wanted Lily to grow up remembering not only loss, but love. "Dad?" Lily asked one morning while tying her sneakers. "Do you think Mom would like the flowers blooming outside?" Nathan looked toward the garden Sarah had once planted with her own hands. Bright yellow daisies swayed gently beneath the morning breeze. He smiled softly. "She would probably tell us they need a little more water." Lily laughed. "Then we should not disappoint her." After watering the flowers together, Nathan drove Lily to school before opening his small woodworking shop on Main Street. The business was never large, but honest work repairing antique furniture and building handcrafted tables paid the bills well enough to keep food on the table and a roof above their heads. Nearly every afternoon, Daniel Carter stopped by after finishing work at a nearby construction company. The two men had been best friends since high school, sharing countless fishing trips, family barbecues, and ordinary conversations that quietly became life's most valuable memories. Daniel often joked that Nathan built furniture while he accidentally found new ways to break it. Their laughter usually filled the workshop long after customers had gone home. One rainy evening, while organizing old storage shelves, Daniel placed a weathered wooden box onto Nathan's workbench. "If anything ever happens to me," he said with an unusually serious expression, "promise me you will take this back to my family." Nathan frowned immediately. "Nothing is going to happen." Daniel smiled gently. "Probably not. But promise me anyway." Nathan hesitated before extending his hand. "You have my word." Daniel shook it firmly. Neither man realized that simple handshake would become one of the most important promises Nathan would ever keep. Time passed, life changed, and unexpected loss eventually made that quiet conversation impossible to forget. Nathan protected the wooden box exactly as he had promised, waiting patiently until he could locate Daniel's remaining family after they had moved away years earlier. Now, standing inside the doorway of the old Carter farmhouse beside Emily and Lily, Nathan finally understood why that promise had never stopped weighing gently upon his heart. Some journeys begin with hope. Others begin with responsibility. The most meaningful ones often begin with both. Emily Carter stepped aside and quietly invited Nathan and Lily into the old farmhouse. The familiar scent of cedar wood and homemade cinnamon filled the air, carrying traces of a home that had weathered years of silence without losing its warmth. Family photographs still lined the hallway exactly as they had decades earlier, although a thin layer of dust hinted that many memories had been waiting patiently for someone willing to revisit them. Emily gently closed the front door before looking again at the weathered wooden box Nathan carefully placed upon the dining room table. "I never knew anyone still had Daniel's things," she admitted softly. Nathan rested one hand against the lid. "He trusted me to keep them safe until they came home." Emily lowered herself into a chair, her blue eyes never leaving the box. "Our parents passed away 2 years after Daniel. I moved to Seattle for work, and this house stayed empty most of the time. I only came back 3 weeks ago because I finally decided it deserved another chance." Lily quietly walked toward a bookshelf filled with old family albums before politely asking, "May I look?" Emily smiled for the first time. "Of course." Nathan carefully opened the wooden box. Inside, every item remained exactly as Daniel had packed it years earlier. He lifted the worn baseball glove first, turning it over with a gentle smile. "We played catch almost every Sunday after church," he said. Emily laughed softly through gathering emotion. "He refused to replace that glove no matter how old it became." Nathan nodded. He said broken-in leather remembered every good day. Next came the scratch pocket watch. Nathan handed it to Emily with great care. "Your grandfather gave this to Daniel on his 18th birthday." Emily's fingers trembled as she held it. "I thought it had been lost forever." Nathan quietly shook his head. Daniel kept it with him everywhere. One by one the memories slowly returned home. A fishing lure from their first camping trip. A faded concert ticket. Photographs of 2 young friends smiling beside a mountain lake. Every object carried another story, and with each story Emily discovered another piece of the brother she had missed for so many years. There were moments of laughter as Nathan remembered Daniel's endless practical jokes, followed by moments of quiet reflection when both of them simply allowed old memories to settle gently around the room. Lily listened closely, smiling whenever another funny story appeared, as though she were slowly getting to know someone she wished she could have met herself. Finally, Nathan reached the bottom of the box and carefully unfolded an old flannel shirt. Beneath it rested a sealed envelope with Daniel's familiar handwriting across the front. It simply read, "For whoever finally brings me home." Nathan frowned slightly because he had never seen the envelope before. Emily looked at him with equal surprise. "Did you know that was there?" Nathan slowly shook his head. "No, I promised never to search through anything that belonged to him." The room fell completely silent as both of them stared at the unopened letter, quietly realizing that after all these years Daniel still had one more story waiting to be told. Emily carefully lifted the sealed envelope from the bottom of the wooden box, holding it as though it might disappear if she breathed too quickly. The familiar handwriting across the front instantly brought tears to her eyes because she had not seen her brother's penmanship in years. Nathan quietly stepped back, believing the letter belonged to her alone, but Emily gently shook her head. "If Daniel wrote this for the person who brought him home, then I think we should read it together." Nathan hesitated before slowly nodding. With careful hands, Emily opened the envelope and unfolded several neatly written pages. The room grew completely still except for the soft ticking of the old pocket watch resting beside the memory box. She began reading aloud. If you are holding this letter, then two things have happened. First, my stubborn best friend actually kept his promise. Second, my family finally has a chance to know the man I always called my brother. Emily paused for a moment as emotion caught in her voice. Nathan looked down quietly, recognizing Daniel's familiar sense of humor even after all these years. She continued reading. Nathan, if life turned out the way I hope, you are probably embarrassed that I am talking about you. You always hated being the center of attention. But I need my family to know something. Whenever life became difficult, Nathan was the first person to show up and the last person to leave. He celebrated every good day with me, carried every hard day beside me, and never once asked for anything in return. If my parents or my little sister ever need someone they can. Trust him the way I always did. Emily slowly lowered the pages, wiping away quiet tears before looking at Nathan with new understanding. He never told us any of this. Nathan smiled gently. Daniel always made other people sound better than they believed they were. Emily laughed softly through her tears. Maybe because it was true. Lily, who had been listening from the nearby sofa, looked toward her father with quiet pride. I already knew that part. Nathan smiled at his daughter before Emily unfolded the final page. There is one more paragraph, she whispered. Her voice softened as she continued. Emily, if you ever come back to this old house after I am gone, promise me you will not let it stay empty forever. Homes are meant to be filled with laughter, shared meals, children running through hallways, and people who choose each other every day. If Nathan is standing beside you when you read this, make him stay for dinner. He never says no to homemade apple pie. The room fell silent before all three of them unexpectedly laughed together. Emily looked toward the kitchen with a warm smile that had not appeared in years. He remembered. Nathan chuckled quietly. Your brother knew me too well. Emily carefully folded the letter and placed it back inside its envelope before meeting Nathan's eyes once again. Then I suppose I should honor his final request. Nathan raised an amused eyebrow. The one about dinner? Emily smiled with gentle confidence. Exactly. And I have a feeling Daniel would be very disappointed if either you or Lily tried to leave before dessert. That evening the farmhouse felt different, as though years of quiet loneliness had slowly stepped outside to make room for familiar voices again. Emily moved comfortably through the old kitchen, preparing the same homemade apple pie and roasted chicken her mother had once served every Sunday, while Nathan insisted on helping chop vegetables despite her playful protests. Lily wandered through the dining room studying framed family photographs before stopping beside a faded picture of two teenage boys covered in fishing mud and laughing so hard they could barely stand. That is definitely you, she said, pointing at Nathan with a grin. Emily laughed as she carried fresh biscuits from the oven. Daniel convinced your father to jump into the lake after a fish that was probably half the size of his hand. Nathan smiled with quiet embarrassment. Your uncle Daniel forgot to mention that part when he told the story. Lily looked at him with amused disbelief. You actually jumped into the lake? Nathan shrugged. Friendship sometimes requires questionable decisions. Their laughter filled the room so naturally that Emily found herself smiling before she even realized it. They gathered around the old oak dining table just as the evening sunlight spilled softly through the kitchen windows. Before anyone reached for their food, Nathan quietly bowed his head. Lily immediately did the same. Emily hesitated for only a moment before joining them. Nathan offered a simple prayer of gratitude for the meal, for old friendships that continued to bless new lives, and for unexpected moments that reminded people they were never truly alone. When he finished, the room remained peacefully silent for another second before Emily whispered, I think Daniel would have liked hearing that. Dinner unfolded with easy conversation rather than heavy memories. Nathan shared stories about opening his woodworking shop after losing Sarah, explaining how building furniture had slowly helped him rebuild his own life as well. Emily admitted that after their parents passed away, she buried herself in architectural design projects across the country because staying busy seemed easier than returning to an empty family home. Lily listened carefully before asking the question only a child could ask with such honesty. Did you miss this house? Emily looked around the familiar dining room before answering softly. Every single day? I just did not know how to come back. Lily smiled gently. Maybe houses get lonely too. Emily blinked as emotion quietly returned to her eyes. I think you might be right. After dessert, Nathan noticed a loose cabinet door hanging unevenly near the kitchen sink. Without saying anything, he retrieved a small screwdriver from his truck and spent a few minutes tightening worn hinges while Emily cleared the dishes. She watched him quietly from across the room. "You really cannot stop fixing things, can you?" Nathan smiled without looking up. "Old habits." Emily leaned against the doorway with folded arms and a warm expression. "Maybe that is why Daniel trusted you so much." Nathan gently closed the repaired cabinet door, now swinging perfectly into place. Some things deserve to work the way they were meant to. Emily glanced around the old farmhouse, then toward Lily laughing quietly at an old family photo album. And for the first time since coming home, she realized Nathan was no longer repairing only worn wood or broken furniture. Somehow, without trying, he had already begun helping an old house and the hearts inside it feel like home again. Over the next several weeks, what began as a single afternoon visit quietly grew into an unexpected routine neither Nathan nor Emily ever planned. Every Saturday after closing his woodworking shop, Nathan drove to the old farmhouse with Lily, carrying a toolbox in the back of his pickup truck instead of another box of memories. Emily never asked him to repair anything, yet there always seemed to be another loose porch railing, another aging window that refused to close properly, or another creaking floorboard patiently waiting for skilled hands. Nathan always smiled and said the same thing. Old houses simply appreciate a little attention. Emily usually answered with a grateful laugh before handing him a glass of sweet tea. While Nathan worked around the property, Lily happily explored the wide backyard where wildflowers stretched across the hillside behind the farmhouse. Emily often joined her, teaching her how to identify butterflies, plant herbs in the old garden beds, and recognize birds by their songs echoing through the surrounding trees. One Saturday morning, they planted fresh tomato vines together in Sarah's favorite gardening style, after Nathan quietly shared stories about his late wife's love of growing vegetables every spring. Kindness more than she realized. Late one afternoon, as Nathan carefully restored an old porch swing Daniel had built years before, Emily carried 2 cups of coffee outside and sat beside him on the front steps. "You know," she said softly, "this swing has been broken for almost 6 years. I kept telling myself I would fix it someday." Nathan tightened the final bolt before testing the wooden frame with a gentle push. The swing moved smoothly for the first time in years. Sometimes someday arrives because someone decides not to wait anymore. Emily smiled thoughtfully. "You always seem to know the right thing to say." Nathan laughed quietly. "I usually figure it out while fixing something." Just then Lily came running across the yard holding a handful of fresh wildflowers. "Look what I found." She divided the flowers into 2 small bouquets before handing one to Emily and the other to her father. Emily looked at the simple gift with genuine delight. "These are beautiful." Lily shrugged with the easy generosity that came naturally to her. Flowers should never belong to only one person. Emily reached down and hugged her warmly. The gesture felt so effortless that even Nathan noticed how naturally they fit together. As evening settled across the mountains, the 3 of them shared lemonade on the newly repaired porch swing while watching the sun disappear behind rolling hills painted in shades of gold and orange. Conversation slowed until comfortable silence quietly took its place. Emily realized she no longer counted the hours until she returned to the city because, for the first time in years, there was nowhere else she wanted to be. Nathan looked toward the old farmhouse, now filled once again with laughter, footsteps, and shared meals, and quietly remembered Daniel's final letter asking that the house never remain empty. Without either of them speaking the thought aloud, both began to understand that sometimes the greatest promises are fulfilled not in a single day, but through countless ordinary moments that slowly teach broken hearts how to feel at home again. One crisp autumn afternoon, Nathan arrived at the farmhouse carrying a bundle of freshly sanded cedar boards he planned to use for repairing the old garden fence Daniel had built years earlier. As he stepped onto the porch, he noticed Emily sitting alone in the swing they had restored together only weeks before. A folded sheet of paper rested quietly in her hands, and although she smiled when she saw him, her eyes carried the unmistakable weight of someone revisiting an old memory. Nathan set the lumber against the porch railing before sitting beside her without asking unnecessary questions. After several peaceful moments, Emily finally spoke. "I found another letter while cleaning the attic this morning. She handed him the carefully folded page. It was hidden inside one of Daniel's old books. Nathan read the familiar handwriting slowly. Unlike the first letter, this one was much shorter. Daniel had written only a few simple sentences. Emily, if you ever find yourself afraid to begin again, remember that homes do not become alive because of walls. They become alive because good people choose to fill them with kindness. Do not spend your life protecting an empty house when you could be building a happy one. Nathan quietly folded the letter and returned it to her. He always had a way of saying a lot with very few words. Emily nodded gently. I think he knew I would need to hear this someday. She looked across the fields where Lily was happily collecting colorful autumn leaves beneath the old maple trees. For years I believed coming back here meant holding on to the past. Now I wonder if it was really an invitation to build a future. Nathan smiled softly. Those two things are not always different. Just then Lily came running toward the porch with an armful of bright red and golden leaves. Emily, can you help me make an autumn wreath for the front door? Emily immediately stood. I would love to. The three of them spent the next hour arranging leaves, pine cones, and small branches into a colorful wreath that Lily proudly hung beside the front entrance. When she stepped back to admire it, she smiled with quiet satisfaction. Now everyone who comes here will know somebody loves this house. Emily looked toward Nathan, her heart unexpectedly touched by the innocent observation. Later that evening, after Lily had fallen asleep during the drive home, Nathan carefully carried her inside before returning to the porch with a warm blanket. Emily accepted it with a grateful smile as cool mountain air settled over the valley. Thank you, she whispered. Nathan looked toward the softly glowing farmhouse windows before answering. Daniel trusted both of us with something bigger than a box of memories. Emily nodded. He trusted us to keep hope alive. Their eyes met beneath the quiet evening sky, and neither felt any need to say more. Sometimes understanding arrives without speeches, and sometimes love begins not with grand declarations, but with two people quietly discovering they have already become part of the same promise that someone else believed was worth leaving behind. As the last weeks of autumn settled across the Blue Ridge Mountains, the old farmhouse no longer echoed with silence. Fresh paint brightened the front porch, flower boxes rested beneath every window, and the laughter that Daniel had once hoped would return now drifted naturally through every room. Nathan still spent his weekdays at the woodworking shop, but Saturdays had quietly become something everyone looked forward to. One evening, after sharing dinner together, Emily walked Nathan to his truck, while Lily chased fireflies across the front yard carrying an old mason jar. The air smelled of fallen leaves and would smoke from nearby chimneys. Emily smiled as she watched Lily laugh beneath the fading sunset. She has a way of making every place feel brighter. Nathan nodded with quiet pride. She learned that from her mother. Emily looked at him gently. And she keeps it alive because of her father. Nathan lowered his eyes for a moment, humbled by the words. They stood together in comfortable silence before Emily finally gathered the courage to speak. I received a call from Seattle yesterday. Nathan listened without interrupting. The architecture firm wants me to come back. They offered me a promotion and a larger office. Nathan smiled sincerely. You worked very hard for that. Emily nodded slowly. I did. She looked toward the farmhouse glowing warmly behind them. A few months ago I would have accepted without thinking. Nathan waited patiently. But something changed. Emily laughed softly. No, someone changed. She turned toward him with calm honesty. I came back believing I needed to save this old house. Instead, this house quietly saved me. Nathan looked at the porch where Lily had just placed another handmade autumn wreath beside the front door. Daniel would be happy to hear that. Emily stepped a little closer. There is another reason I stayed. Nathan met her eyes, and before either of them searched for perfect words, Lily came running toward them with the mason jar glowing softly from a handful of tiny fireflies. Look, she whispered excitedly. They only shine when everything gets quiet. Emily knelt beside her and smiled. That is beautiful. Lily looked back and forth between the two adults before asking with complete innocence, Can we keep making Saturdays together forever? Nathan and Emily exchanged an emotional glance. Neither had expected a child to ask the question they had both been quietly carrying inside their hearts. Emily reached for Lily's hand first before gently taking Nathan's with her other hand. I think that sounds like a wonderful idea, she answered softly. Nathan smiled with peaceful certainty. So do I. No dramatic promises followed. No grand declarations. Interrupted the quiet mountain evening. The answer was already resting in the simple way they stood together beneath the porch light. Three people whose lives had slowly woven themselves into one family through kindness, patience, shared memories, and ordinary days that became extraordinary simply because they were shared. At that moment, Nathan understood that Daniel's greatest gift had never been the wooden box waiting inside the farmhouse. It had been the unexpected path that began with one promise and quietly led every one of them home. 1 year later, the old Carter farmhouse had become exactly what Daniel had hoped it would one day be. Fresh flowers lined the front porch from early spring through late autumn. Children's laughter drifted through open windows every afternoon, and the warm glow of family dinners once again filled rooms that had spent too many years in silence. Nathan never moved there because of a dramatic decision. Emily never stayed because of a grand promise. Somewhere between repairing porch railings, sharing Sunday meals, helping Lily with homework at the kitchen table, and watching sunsets from the old wooden swing, they simply realized they had already built a life together one ordinary day at a time. Nathan continued running his woodworking shop in Asheville, where customers often admired the quiet craftsmanship that reflected the patience with which he approached every part of life. Emily accepted freelance architectural projects that allowed her to remain close to home instead of returning to Seattle, discovering that success felt far more meaningful when she no longer had to sacrifice the people she loved to achieve it. Lily, now 10 years old, proudly called the farmhouse her favorite place in the world because, as she often explained to her classmates, it is where every room tells a happy story now. On a bright Saturday afternoon, neighbors gathered for a small community picnic beneath the old oak trees surrounding the property. Children chased one another across the wide green lawn, while homemade pies cooled on picnic tables covered with checkered cloth. Friends from Nathan's workshop stood beside Emily's lifelong neighbors, talking as though they had known one another for years. Just before everyone sat down to eat, Lily quietly disappeared into the house and returned carrying the weathered wooden memory box that had started everything. She carefully placed it on a small table beneath Daniel's framed photograph beside Sarah's smiling family picture. Emily looked at Nathan with gentle curiosity. Did she plan this? Nathan smiled softly. I think she has been planning it all week. Lily stood before everyone with the simple confidence only children possess. Uncle Daniel gave us memories, she said. Mom Sarah gave us love. Dad and Emily gave this house another chance. I think they all belong together. The quiet gathering fell completely silent before warm smiles slowly appeared across every face. Emily reached for Nathan's hand while both of them looked toward the photographs resting side by side. There was no sadness in that moment, only gratitude. The people they had loved and lost were no longer reminders of what had been taken away. They had quietly become part of the foundation supporting everything that had grown afterward. As evening settled across the Blue Ridge Mountains, Nathan and Emily sat together on the restored porch swing while Lily laughed nearby, with neighborhood children beneath strings of softly glowing lights. Nathan looked toward the familiar front door where this unexpected journey had begun and smiled peacefully. I came here to keep a promise. Emily gently rested her hand in his. And instead, you brought all of us home. The old farmhouse stood quietly beneath the stars, no longer waiting for life to return, because it had finally become what Daniel always believed it could be. Sometimes the greatest inheritance a friend leaves behind is not a box filled with treasured possessions. Sometimes it is the quiet courage to open one ordinary door, keep one heartfelt promise, and discover that love has been patiently waiting on the other side all along.